Happy Tuesday, friends, and welcome to the Budgeting with a Partner live Q&A. My name is Ernie. I'm one of the teachers around here at YNAB, and I'm joining you, as always, from Eau Claire, Wisconsin, in the United States. Now, before we get started, and some of you who've been to one of my live workshops, you know the drill. Why don't you, in the comments section, type on over where you're joining from? Always fun to see where others are checking in from. Good to see who's here. Also, seeing your responses, then I'll know that everyone can hear me all right. So we know things are working with technology. All right, we have Darlene, we have Jason. Welcome to you both. Good to have you here. Darlene's checking in from Kentucky. Hey, one of my best friends lives in Louisville. So visited there a few years ago. Love the place. We have Jen from Phoenix. San Antonio, Maria from Los Angeles, Brock from Indianapolis. We have British Columbia, Canada. So we're all over the place. Eric from Bloomington, Illinois, and a pretty big crowd. Looks like there's 35 folks in here. So those of you that are just coming through that virtual door, haven't missed anything other than introductions. My name is Ernie, and if you want, you can type on over where you're joining from. We have Marcus. We have Murr. Hi, Murr. Recognize that name? Yep. Budget nerd fan there. Good to have you. All right. So it looks like things are working with YouTube. Excellent. Folks are settled in here. So why don't we dive in? So budgeting with a partner, what I want to cover here are primarily the different ways that you can set up the budget with your partner. And then we'll talk a little bit about the importance of setting up a budget meeting with your partner, just so you can have that ongoing communication throughout the weeks. And then finally, we'll talk about how to get your partner on board. Maybe you have a partner who is reluctant to this idea of budgeting, or maybe overwhelmed with the idea. So some things that you can do to help bring your partner along. And the whole purpose of this live Q&A is to help get you and your partner on the same page when it comes to money, because then you would have one less thing to worry about. And wouldn't that be great? Of all the things that we can worry about or are worrying about, how about money not being one of those? So I thought it'd be helpful if we just zoomed out at first and we started with the big picture. And for those of you that you've been around YNAB for a while, you're YNABers yourself, you've heard this a million times. YNAB is all about aligning your money with your priorities. And that's really easy to do when you're by yourself because, well, there's only one set of priorities that you have to be concerned about, and that's your own. But when you're budgeting with a partner, it gets a bit more complicated because now, instead of just your own priorities, you have three sets of priorities that you have to think about: yours, mine, and ours. And to successfully manage money with another person, you need a spending plan that satisfies all three sets of priorities. And so if you haven't already, a really good first step budgeting with your partner is to figure out what those priorities are. Figure out what your own individual priorities are. Have your partner do the same thing, and then come together. And this is what most of the discussion is going to be about. What are our priorities? What do we want our money to do for us? And then once you've settled on the priorities, you can take all of those priorities to the plan so that you have this shared look now of what you want your money to do. So let's get into the actual ways that you can set up the budget with the partner. And as I'm going through these demos, if you have a question, type it on over in YouTube in the comments section. I might not be able to get to it right then and there, but I'll try to get to it at certain breaks. And if I am not coming back to your question, type it in again for me, because I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep up with everything. And also keep in mind too, as I go through the various ways that you can set up your budget, these are not the only ways. And really there's no wrong way that you can set up your budgets. But my hope is these are the most, probably I would say, popular ones. And so they might give you some ideas. All right, option number one, this is the one with the fewest moving parts. So if all of your shared accounts or if all of your accounts are shared, then you're simply going to share one budget in YNAB. And so let me introduce you to Alex and Sam. They've always had combined finances. So when Alex signed up for YNAB, they added all of their accounts, all of their shared accounts to this one budget. And then once the accounts were added, well, let's invite Sam and set this thing up together. So using YNAB Together, and that's a free feature that's available to everyone. Click on the name of your budget, YNAB Together right here. Alex was able to invite Sam to this budget. So Sam gets this personalized invitation to the budget. Now Sam can set up their own YNAB account and have their own YNAB login. And then once they both have access to that shared budget, it's just bringing all of those priorities to life. And so that means customizing these categories. Here are the things we're spending money on. Here are the things we're saving for. And then using those targets to tell the category, here's how much money we need in this category, and here's when we need that money by. And most of those categories are going to cover the shared priorities. And then to handle the yours and mine, notice how this couple has set up an Alex spending and a Sam spending category. So these are the fun money categories. And what you do with your partners, you decide together how much goes into those categories every month. And then the fun part, you're each free to spend that money however you want, guilt-free, no questions asked. So that is satisfying yours, mine, and ours all in one budget. And then when money comes in this case, whether it's from Sam or Alex, they decide together, because they're viewing it as our money, they're deciding together, what do we allocate those dollars to? And then on the spending side, they're each free to enter their spending however they want, maybe on their personal computer or their mobile device, but they can share that transaction tasks together. So let me pause right there. Any questions with this first option, shared accounts, shared budget? All right, and if you're typing something on over, I can always get to that at the very end. Let me move on to the next option. So maybe you have separate accounts. Absolutely nothing wrong with separate accounts. If you do have separate accounts, you could choose to go the path of separate budgets. And so the nice thing with separate budgets is you can still utilize YNAB Together. So you can still share a YNAB subscription. That's going to save you both a little bit of money. You don't each have to have your own subscription, but you can still have separate budgets. And then again, each partner will have their own login to their separate budgets. So let me introduce you to the next couple we have here, Omar and Chris. And so they each have their own checking, savings, and credit cards. And so they're primarily keeping track of all their own spending and earning, but they do share some expenses like the mortgage and utilities. And anytime that you're sharing expenses, it's always a really good idea to make sure that both partners know exactly how much they are contributing to those shared expenses every single month. And so in this relationship, Omar and Chris have agreed to each put $1,200 towards those shared expenses. So let's get into the budgets now. We will start with Omar. So here are Omar's individual separate accounts. Here he has a group to prioritize the shared expenses. And again, he's contributing $1,200 every month to those. And then everything below that, those are his own categories, right? His own priorities. And then we have the same thing with Chris. This is Chris's budget. Chris has their separate accounts, a group for the shared expenses, and then everything outside of that group is their own priority, right? Their own categories. And so now let me demo for you, how do you handle those shared expenses? Because for those folks who have the separate accounts, you know that there's a lot of moving pieces when you're sharing expenses. It's transferring that money back and forth. And so how do we make that all work in YNAB? And so let's cover the mortgage. And so the way that this couple handles the mortgage is Chris doesn't pay the bank. Chris just gives Omar their portion. And then once Omar has all the money for the mortgage, then he's actually paying the bank. So we're going to start this process on Chris's side. So first thing Chris did, let's say Chris sent $800 from their checking to Omar. So we're going to represent that money leaving Chris's accounts and Chris's budget. So I'm going into Chris's checking account because that's where the money left. Add transaction. The money went to Omar for the mortgage, $800. So we see the money leaving the account. We see the money leaving the category. So now Omar has that money. That money landed in his actual checking account. So we want that represented here. So Omar checking, add transaction. That money came from Chris. And whoops, bad typing. Now I'm going to categorize it straight into the mortgage category. Inflow, $800. So you see the new 800 on the Omar checking side. Now Omar's looking at his budget and he can see, yep, I've got the full amount that I need to make that mortgage payment. So Omar signs into the bank, makes that payment, and now records that payment in YNAB. So we go payee, bank, mortgage, $1,600. Perfect. Makes sense? Now, the other way that you can handle shared expenses is you can just divide them by who pays them. So maybe you're like, I'm really sick of transferring money back and forth. How about you just cover the internet and water? And that's what Omar's has chosen to do. And then Chris is responsible for the electric, right? So you can choose however you want to handle those shared expenses, no right or wrong way, and both ways can be handled in YNAB. So once again, let me pause. Any questions about the separate accounts, the separate budget setup? Jason said, so it's not sharing the same login. Correct. If you invite your partner via YNAB Together, again, this is a free feature, you both have separate logins, so you don't need to share those logins. And the other nice thing is you can also, each partner can decide on their own whether or not they want to set up 2FA, two-factor authentication. So I love two-factor authentication. So right away, that's what I did on my budget. My wife hates 2FA. So I never would have been able to convince her if we were sharing a login to do 2FA. And so now she has her own separate login and she can do whatever she wants with it. All right, checking over the questions there. Excellent. And for those of you that are just coming in, welcome. Good to have you here. Welcome, Amy. Welcome from Sydney, Australia. All right, excellent. Let's move on to the third way that you can organize the budget with your partner. So maybe you're not in this all or nothing category, these all or nothing buckets, and you have some sort of combination of the shared and separate accounts. So there's two ways that you can handle this in YNAB. Let's talk about the first. The first way is you can have three separate budgets. And so you will each have your own individual, like we just looked at with Omar and Chris. And then you could have a third shared budget. And so that shared budget is only going to include the shared accounts. And so if Omar and Chris ever want to open some shared accounts, they could then create a third shared budget. All they would have to do is from one of their budgets, click on the name, new budget. And then once they get that new shared budget all set up, it might look something like this. It's probably going to be pretty simplistic because there's only a handful of shared expenses and there's probably not as many shared accounts as there are individual accounts. And so the key here is that you're only recording the earning and spending that happens in the shared accounts in that shared budget. And so a quick demo here. Let's say Omar transferred $1,200 from his checking account to the shared checking account for those shared expenses. So that's going to be an outflow from Omar's checking. And then into the shared checking account, I'm going to add that transaction as an inflow. So payee, where did that money come from? Omar. I'm categorizing as ready to assign because there's multiple jobs that I have for these $1,200. Adding that as an inflow, save. So now that money's available to assign, and they split these costs right down the middle. So we're just going to go halvesies here. 125, 100, 175. And so now the categories are still yellow, and they're just waiting for Chris's portion, Chris's $1,200 there. Now, the other way that you can approach the hybrid method here is you can put all of your accounts, so the individual, the shared accounts, in one budget. And this is what that could look like. And right away, you can tell it's a little bit more intense than the other setups because there are so many more accounts. There are so many more categories. And to keep everything organized, I think a really good approach is to set up separate groups for each account type. So all of the money in these 3 shared accounts, that's going to be held in the shared expenses group. All of Omar's individual money, that's going to be allocated to Omar's individual group. And then same with Chris, their money in Chris's group. So let's walk through this so that you can see how it all shakes out. Let's say today Chris was paid $2,000. So that money landed in Chris's checking account. So we're going to go Chris employer, ready to assign $2,000. Now that $2,000 has a number of different jobs. Let's say the first $1,200 is for those shared expenses. So we go, again, I'm just going right down the middle, halvesies on all these. We go 125 there, 100. So Chris has contributed her portion, her equal portion, to the shared expenses. There's still $800 left that need jobs in the budget. So that money's going to now go into Chris's group. And so what I'm going to do is just underfunded. YNAB assigns the money for me. Uh-oh, did I miss Alec? Oh, I know what I did. I was like, why do I have red up there? Let's try this again. I put the full 350 in vacation, underfunded. Whoops. I had that underfunded. That's what I did. I had the category selected, so I put that 175 in there, a new 175. Okay, so now we're back to where I want to be. But notice now I've allocated the money to the correct group. So it's doing exactly what Chris wants it to do, but all that money is still tied up in their individual checking account. So what we need to do is move $1,200 to the shared checking account because these shared expenses get paid from the shared account. And so Chris is going to log into their bank, make a transfer to the shared checking, and then we're going to represent that with a transfer in YNAB. So Chris checking, add transaction. We set up transfers in the payee field. So I'm going to select the account that I just moved the money to, Omar and Chris checking. No category, $1,200. That's going to be an outflow, money leaving Chris's checking. So there we go. So now the money is sitting in the shared accounts. So I know that $1,200 is represented right here. It's the $1,200 in the shared group. And then that $800 in Chris's individual account, that's the $800 in Chris's individual group. So let me pause. Actually, before I pause, let me say one more thing about this particular method. Because there are so many accounts and categories, if you choose to go this route, make sure that you keep these accounts reconciled. Make sure the balances are always in agreement with the bank so that you know you can trust all the other numbers that you're seeing in the budget. And then the other thing, as soon as someone is paid, make sure that money gets allocated correctly to the categories and then transferred correctly to the accounts. So how about we pause? Any questions with the hybrid method here? All right, let's move on. So, once you've decided on a structure and you've figured out what all those shared priorities are, now the important part is regular communication about those shared priorities. And I think probably the best way to make sure that you and your partner are regularly communicating about your shared priorities is to set up a budget meeting. And the purpose of this budget meeting, and I would say too, make sure it's regular. So at least once a month. And really all you're asking yourself at these budget meetings is the money still aligned with our priorities? Is it still doing exactly what we want it to do? And specifically, you could talk about any adjustments that need to be made. So maybe you're looking at some categories that are overspent. Hey, we got to roll with the punches a little bit here. Where should we take money from to cover these overspent categories? That's a good thing to discuss. You could walk through the different progress that you've made towards your goals. Do we need to maybe slow down a little? Or are we trying to be too aggressive with debt payoff? Or maybe can we ratchet up savings a little bit more? Or maybe a good thing to talk about during these budget meetings is to look at the next 2 or 4 weeks. Hey, is there any unplanned spending or out of the normal spending that you can anticipate that we can make a plan for right here and now in the budget meeting? And the other thing to keep in mind with these budget meetings is you don't have to talk about the numbers, especially if your partner isn't a budget nerd like you are, and they kind of get the glossed over look when you start mentioning budgeting and YNAB and all that. Just talk about life. What do you want to do this month? What are some activities that you have planned with your family, with your friends? Is there any restaurant we want to eat at or try out? Do we want to travel anywhere, take a short trip somewhere? And then, kind of once you get a feel for what that next month is going to look like with you and your partner, then you can translate all of those priorities into numbers in the budget, right? And then you can make it all work kind of behind the scenes without your partner there. And then the only other tip that I have to make these budget meetings impactful and meaningful is to turn them into a budget date. Order takeout, pour a glass of wine, put the game on, do whatever it takes to make them feel special. Make it look, or also make it be something that you look forward to. Like, this is going to be a fun event where we're talking about money, believe it or not. Now, the last thing I want to close on, and then we can get to any questions that you have about budgeting with a partner, is, what do you do if you have someone who is reluctant to this idea of budgeting, or just not really super excited, or maybe they feel overwhelmed with this idea of budgeting? And first off, I want to say this is completely normal. We see this all the time. And I think generally that's how relationships work. Like, there's one person that's really interested in the numbers and then the other one not so much. So here's some ideas. The first, make sure that your partner has some fun spending money. That's really important. That's going to reduce that feeling of restriction that they may be associating with the name, the word budgeting. And so for those of you that are sharing a budget, the shared accounts, put that fun money category in there for your partner, right? And monitor that category, not to see what they've been spending on, but make sure they've been spending that money. Hey, you've got $200 available. Why don't you, take a couple hours, go have some fun, spend some money. And then if you have separate accounts, I think it's just reinforcing with your partner that, hey, once you have met the shared obligations, right? Once you've contributed your portion, you're free to do with your money whatever you want, right? You don't even have to have a budget if you don't want to. I think that's going to go a long way with your partner. The other idea, and this is more long-term, is you could try to find something that your partner's always wanted, but you've never had the opportunity to buy, and then you can use the budget to make that a reality. And so my wife, Christy, has always wanted a KitchenAid mixer. If I was really trying to get her on board, what I could do is say, all right, sweetie, I know you've always wanted this KitchenAid mixer. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to make a plan for it. We're going to figure out how much it's going to cost. I'm going to create a category for it in the budget. I'm going to, I probably wouldn't tell her about targets because then her eyes would start kind of glossing over, but I'd say, we're going to save for this thing. Every time you and I are paid, I'm going to put a little bit of money towards that KitchenAid mixer, and I'm going to update her on the progress. And then eventually when we have enough money, hey, it's time. Go buy that KitchenAid mixer, right? Spend that money guilt-free. And the hope here is that your partner starts to see the budget as a tool for getting the things that you want, right? Not some form of restriction that you're trying to impose on them. And then the final thing I want to say here is don't be scared to take the budgeting reins. Maybe for whatever reason, your partner just really doesn't want anything to do with the budget. It's okay if you take on all the work, right? You set all the targets, you do all the allocation of the money, you enter all the spending, you import it all. And then maybe over time, because you got to keep your partner involved, just at least communicating here's where we stand with category balances. We have enough money saved for vacation and I'm paying all the bills, all that kind of stuff. Then your partner might start getting a little bit more interested. You're like, hey, we're able to do some pretty cool things. We're paying off a lot of debt. We're going on these cool trips. Tell me a little bit more about budgeting. And then they can take on a little bit more of the tasks associated with budgeting. So there we go, friends. Those are a few of the ways that you can organize the budget, tips on the budget meeting, the budget date, and then also working with a reluctant partner. So let me turn this over to you. What other questions do you have about budgeting with a partner? We've got a lot of time here, so I'm happy to stick around and answer as many of those questions as I can. Ashley says Christy needs that mixer. Yeah, I probably need to listen to that, Ashley. You're my boss, right? She really does need that mixer, though. She's made a lot of sacrifices for what I've wanted to do with the budget. Does the YNAB program recognize automatic payments, or do you have to note that in YNAB? So if you have linked your account, Jen, and linking works with most US, Canadian, and UK banks, YNAB will automatically bring in those new transactions, earning or spending, once the bank is done processing those transactions. Yep. So it's really convenient, but it's not instantaneous. And so keep in mind, there's other ways to get spending and earning in YNAB. You can enter transactions yourself. You can download a file from your bank, and you can use a combination of the methods without any fear of duplicates, because YNAB is really good at catching the duplicates between the different methods. Let me just scroll through the comments here to see if there's anything else that I've missed. And again, if I did miss a question or a comment you want me to see, just copy and paste it in again. No offense taken there. Let me show you this. Let's go over to the mobile app. Go to my home screen here. Swipe right. Widgets. So widgets, these are a way to have quick access, and they're available on Android and iOS, quick access to category balances. And so if your partner is actively involved with the spending plan, with budgeting, they probably have a different set of categories. You can both do is on your phones, set up these widgets for those important categories. That way, instead of going into the actual app and scrolling through to find how much do I have in home maintenance, how much do I have in my yard category, I can just set it up in the widget, and then I can look to see where those category balances are at. And then, Christy, my wife, can do the same thing. Her favorite categories can be posted on her phone. So a lot of YNABers like to utilize those widgets. With couples who have very different incomes, so 20/80, do you find people ever try a sort of 20/80 split on those shared expenses? Does that work well? Any ideas? Yeah, I know there are a number of couples. I've heard from couples that they split the expenses based on that income differentiation, right? So they, 80/20 split on the income, 80/20 split on the expenses. And I think that's just a communication piece. Talking through, is this something we're comfortable with? Is this what we want to do? And if both partners are on board with that, there's absolutely nothing wrong. And there's also nothing wrong with just kind of splitting everything down the middle. So I don't really have, an answer one way or the other because they have both worked. Do you use YNAB to remind you of topics to cover at your budget date? If so, how? Great question. I do not personally. A lot of times, if I have questions, hey, what is this spending from Target for? I'll ask Christy, or I'll just send her a text message when she's at work. Or, if there's some money that just came in, what do we want to do with this bonus? Or is there any, I'm planning out the May budget. What kind of spending are you anticipating with the boys? And so our budget meetings are pretty fluid. They're on the fly. But my buddy Ben, a fellow budget nerd, he works here at YNAB. He does use the budget for those budget meeting topics. And generally, at least in my conversations with him, it's about the inflows. And so he has a number of holding categories. And I think he just told me about a situation where I think his grandma sent the kids like $50. And so he put that $50 into a holding category until him and his wife could come together and figure out, well, how exactly do we want to assign that money? And then he does the same thing with, if there's bonus money or any kind of additional inflow, it just kind of sits in those holding categories until together they can make that decision. I have also heard of couples who use flags. And I've tried this. I've experimented with a little bit. If there's some spending that goes on, maybe if Christy gets to the point where she's like, Ernie, you got to stop annoying me at work with these text messages about, what this spending is for. I could flag a transaction. And you can edit flags and you can call them whatever I want. Maybe just needs discussion. And then I could flag it as orange. So then when the budget meeting comes up, let's go into all accounts. Let's bring up the orange needs discussion transactions. And let's talk about these. How are we going to categorize these? Or you could use a color and then your partner understands that, hey, when it's my turn, when I, have my budget routine and I get into the budget, I will search for those categories or that color flag, and then I'll make a decision about, how that spending needs to be handled on the budget side of things. So flags is another good use, a good way to kind of bring up discussion in those budget meetings. If both partners are on board, but once you organize the shared budget in a way that makes sense to them individually, is there a way to do that? So, Brock, I don't know if you're talking about, I have a certain view of the budget and my partner has a different view. There's not a way of doing that, but because you're always going to have the same view of the current budget, but you can organize it however makes the most sense for you and your partner. Yeah, so you can rename these groups however you want. Maybe your partner has a group and underneath that, it's all the bills that they're responsible for paying or that, the categories that they're interested in spending from. You could have like partner A bills, partner B bills, partner A true expenses, partner B true expenses. Maybe instead of just a spending category, you and your partner have a spending group. So you get X amount of dollars and then that money goes towards, movies or eating out, golfing, right? Whatever kind of things your partner and you are into, separate it out a little bit more granularity than the individual spending categories. So I hope that helps there, Brock. Let me know if you have any follow-up to that. Any other questions? Or I should say, what other questions that you have? Because budgeting with a partner can be complicated. A lot of moving pieces there. Oh, excellent. Thank you, Ashley. Check out for those of you interested in that budget meeting and setting something up with your partner. Ashley in the comments section just dropped the YNAB's money night worksheet. So Ashley has used that with her husband. I have not used that, but I'm sure it's fantastic. So you can take a look at that link there. Worksheet that you could probably, I forgot, I can highlight these comments. Yeah, worksheet that you can download and fill out. Some folks like that. Can you know who made a budget movement with YNAB? That's a great question. Let me highlight that. So there is no way of tracing Ernie made this movement of money or Christy made that movement, but you can access all of the moves that have been made in YNAB. And so recent moves right up here at the top, I don't have any money moves here. Let's go to a budget that has some moves. Recent moves. Oh, not there either. I think this one. There we go. So I click on recent moves and that gives me 34 days of all the ways that I have moved money around into the budget. And so that might be all the information that you need to kind of figure out, okay, who is a, person that moved that. And it is also helpful too if if you're both actively involved and maybe there's a money move that wasn't communicated and you're like, wait a second, this category is yellow. I thought we had more money in there than what, I thought we fully funded this category at the beginning of the month. Money moves will help you track down when that movement of money happened and what it went to. And you can also access those moves in the individual category. Just hover over that assigned amount. There's that little time clock right there. But boy, that would be a really cool feature, right? Like I made these moves, my partner made these moves. I like that. Can the invited partner also view, manage things like the loan tracking accounts or just non-budget accounts? Yeah, the invited partner has full access to the budget and they can edit it. They can add spending, they can import spending, they can reconcile, they can move money, right? So they can do everything that their partner can do in that shared budget. Yeah, and that's another thing too. Maybe your partner's just interested in the investment accounts. And so, they could add those as unlinked tracking accounts way at the bottom in our account type, add them as an asset. And then your partner, a couple times a month, once a month, goes into those tracking accounts, updates those balances, and kind of keeps an eye on the net worth. And then, the other partner is more invested in the day-to-day spending and saving in that relationship. Yeah, that was a question from Chauncey that I just answered there. Excellent. Now we're warming up a little bit with the questions. What else do you have here? Oh, I know. I have something else for you, just a resource. If you want to think a little bit more about this budgeting with a partner thing, I'll put a link to our budgeting. Let me show this. Our budget together better page on our website. So it has screenshots of all the different ways we walk through of how you can set up your budget. So if you want to reference those, it also has a number of other resources to help get you and your partner on the same page with money. So there's a lot of good information there about budget meetings and budget dates. There's questions that you can ask your partner if you're trying to figure out, how to, what are the priorities that your partner has that you have, and that the priorities that you have Together. So be sure to check out that link. Excellent. Well, how about we do one last call here? Any other questions about budgeting with a partner? And this is a regular live Q&A that I do every week. Generally, it's Tuesdays at 9 Eastern over on Zoom. This one is special. I did it on YouTube Live. So if you want to attend another one or some question comes up, sign up for the Zoom session and then pop in probably 15 or 20 minutes after the demo. It's going to be the same one that I did here. And then when we get to the Q&A time, you can ask your question, get an answer, and move on with your evening. Excellent. Well, folks, thank you so much for your time. I really do hope this has been helpful, and I wish you and your partner the best of luck moving forward with your budget together. Maybe I'll see you in a future live Q&A or over on Budget Nerds, but if not, take care and happy budgeting. See you, friends.